It takes a brave and independent mindset to go tiny. If you are trying to figure out your tiny pivot, this podcast is here to inspire and connect you with the other unconventional, gritty, inspirational people within this community. I am Laura Lynch, your tiny house friend and host. On this show, we are always going to come back to money because as a financial planner, this is the question I hear the most. How do I make this work for me financially? Well, that's my jam, so jump in, let's go. New episodes drop every Thursday. Well, Ryan Mitchell, welcome to Less House More Moola podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. You're one of those people who has put out so much great information for everybody who's out there trying to figure out this lifestyle and how they're going to do it and where they're going to do it. And really you're sort of covering the whole spectrum of all the different ways that we can live tiny and how we can think about it. And so I'm super excited that you're here to share more about the origin story and also, you know, what you're working on right now. So please introduce yourself and the website that you have created.
Yeah, so my name is Ryan Mitchell. I run a website called thetinylife.com. And there we started out in exclusively tiny houses, and over the years we've grown to expand it to simple living. And within simple living we talk about three main kind of buckets, if you will. So that's obviously tiny houses, then minimalism, and then homesteading is kind of our latest one. And so those are three different ways that people can live simply. The kind of aim of the site is to bring information, resources, guides, and checklists and all that kind of stuff for the people who actually want to implement simple living in those different ways and all the nitty gritty that goes into that.
That's awesome. So we're going to come back to that concept of simple living because I want to dig into that some more. But tell us, like, what's the origin story? How did thetinylife.com come to be?
Yeah, so kind of probably like before the actual website, kind of what happened was, 2009 rolled around. Everyone knows what happened there with the recession. And I was fresh out of grad school into kind of like my first like adult career type of job. And I was on the traditional path. And so about 6 months in, 2009 hit, and the company shut down that we were working for, and that kind of jolted me awake, I guess you could say. I had gone the traditional path of going to school, getting a degree, working on the job, going to get the house with the white picket fence, 2.5 kids with a red car in the driveway. But at that point, it gave me like a moment of pause, and I started to just think about, okay, if I can do all those things and, it didn't pan out the way that I expected to, or that was represented to me to, what else might not be true? How do I want to think about this? It was just a moment of kind of re-examination, and I'm glad for it because, it was about as early in your career as you can. I think I was 23 or something at the time, maybe 25. I don't know, somewhere in there. And I just went back to basics, and I started to think about my, what I wanted to do for my whole life, and what I want my career to look like, what I want my relationship with money, and in that, I remember the experience that was, I was standing in that parking lot outside of the office, and all of us that had just gotten laid off were standing there, cardboard boxes in our hands with our, the contents of our desk all in them. And the thing that like rung out in my mind was, how am I going to afford rent? Right? Like, I did all the things. I worked hard. I did a good job, got good performance reviews. And here I am in a parking lot holding a box worrying about rent. What went wrong? And so um, I started to look at my budget, like where my money was going, and housing was about 50% of my income at that point. So rent, utilities, insurance, all that gets wrapped up into that. And so I said, crazy question. What if I could just eliminate this line item? I don't know like how I would do that, right? Tiny houses were not in my consciousness at that point. And it's like, even if I only got halfway there, right? Like say 25%, they would be huge. So that's when I started looking for alternatives to housing and stumbled upon tiny homes. From there, I just was inspired by the idea and started to pursue that journey and made a website as a way to kind of document my journey there. And it was super early days. There wasn't any other real websites out there for tiny houses, which is part of why I wanted to document it, because I was looking for all these answers. And I was like, well, if I have to figure them out, I might as well share them with other people, so they don't have to go through all the learning curve that I did. And that's where the website started and kind of where we found our origin story.
That is such an amazing story. It kind of gives me chills because I can think of all the people, back in that time frame and even in the more recent, crisis that we had with the pandemic, right? People being in their lives and just
Mm,
standing there and like going, what, like you said, what if other things that I've been working towards or assuming are not true? Like we all realized, hey, supply chains may not be
yeah.
all that we've always had everything we needed, very available. And what if things aren't available to us anymore?
Hmm.
Then what, right? And I too was in a spot during the pandemic, where my income, was plummeting, and I was like, okay, what is this huge chunk that I'm so stressed about, and
Yeah.
how can I possibly, make a change there? Because like you're right. And Alaska, the Tiny House Concierge said it on her episode too, right? When you look through the spreadsheet of what you spend money on, it's housing is just so glaring. And like if you can make just a small change there, it's the biggest impact you can have. It's bigger than getting a 40% pay raise, right? It's
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of where I started with housing. And then I started working my way down to the next biggest, the third,
Mm-hmm.
and, some things it's difficult to replace, right? Or offset or things like that. Maybe you can make some gains there. And there could be things there too that you say, like, hey, this is the lifestyle that I want. This is the quality that I want. This is what I want to do with
Yeah.
my money. Um, but I think the difference there is, okay, you made a choice. You
Right.
evaluated, you made the decision. It's intentional. And even if you don't save a single dollar, those dollars are different because they're intentionally thought about and spent and deployed in the way that's right for you. So the intentionality is a big part of simple living, whether it's money matters or just your entire lifestyle. So, we could talk about that too a little bit. Is just, intentional choices in your life, money or otherwise.
Yes, I definitely want to dig into that. And right before we get there, I just want to talk about what's keeping you on this journey in terms of sharing, right? Because that's what your whole website is about. It's about giving, resources to folks that are trying to figure this out. And
Hmm.
you've been in this a long time now, right? Since 2009 of
Yeah.
documenting, simple living, tiny living. What keeps you motivated and in this space, even as maybe there's more resources, more content out there? Why do you
Hmm.
keep doing it?
Yeah. I mean, I've grown to really enjoy the process of developing the website and the content and other things too. And then also, being early to the space and kind of being able to ride up it, and then also like contributing to that rise. There's a little bit of a duty to kind of be a good steward of that. Um, so there's part of that, and I'm in a fortunate position where like I can help so many people with publishing, different guides and things like that. I haven't done the numbers lately, but the last we were able to peg it, it was over 10,000 tiny houses built directly from our resources. So like that's incredible, right? The impact that you can have. And you think about that, that's 10,000 houses. There could be more than one person in that house, and each one of those people that live in that home, hopefully through some of your guidance, is living a better life. They're impacting like their families, their friends, their communities, like the network effect of positive outcomes there is really powerful. So, yeah, I count myself fortunate, and I also really enjoy the work. It's just something that I've kind of found a knack in, enjoyed doing, and I've been doing it for over 15 years now. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you are a little addicted to your way of helping people, right? And I
yeah.
think this is another thing that tiny living can provide is an opportunity for folks to focus on what they're really passionate about and find a way to make money in what they're really passionate about and where they can help in the world. And that is just an amazing benefit of reducing your overhead, your cost of living, is being
Mhm.
able to reposition yourself in a place where you get a lot of meaningfulness out of your work. And so I love that you have all of those things that have come together for you. um, it's just, it's just the magic of tiny living. So let's go
Mhm.
back to simple living because I want to dig into that more. We're seeing a lot of, potentially rebranding in the tiny living space. And so simple living is a very attractive concept. Tell us what that means to you.
Um, I don't get too dogmatic about definitions or things like that, mainly because I think at its core, what um, simple living is it part of it is required for you to figure out kind of what that is. Now we can help you and guide you, and these are the common things that a lot of people think about or pursue, but ultimately it should be customized to you and what you do. So um, I think if there was a part of the definition, it's just like taking a step back, doing an intentional examination of your life and the way that you interact with the world, um, and then making decisions that you think are right for you. And then, we can give you the tools to enact whatever those things are. Um, and you may not get it right at the first pass, right? And that's okay. But like what I found about simple living is that it's a positive feedback loop, and it's like an addiction in the best way. So you think about your life, you make some changes, your life gets better substantially, typically, and then you're like, wow, that was it. What else could I think about or improve or tweak? And then you make that change, and that feels better. Your life is better, your relationships are better, your money, your bank account, like everything, like just sleeping at night, worry, anxiety, like all these things just get better. And so you end up on this positive feedback loop. So um, yeah, I don't have like a very specific definition, but that would be the edges of it, is taking a step back, evaluating what you want to do, being intentional, and then pursuing those things.
Yeah, I love that. The values, right? Understanding what is most important to you and figuring that out, and then looking across your life and deciding, what am I doing because it's an expectation or it's a
Yeah.
should? What am I buying because it's an expectation or a should? What am I making my life more complex with just because I
Hmm.
feel like I'm supposed to? And then what is actually true to me? And so how can I, put those two things together and eliminate the stuff that doesn't resonate or work for me specifically? And the more that we can get rid of and the more complexity we can get rid of, the easier our life can become. And so I totally buy into that intentional mindset for sure. I think that that is the key to being really happy and being consistent with yourself. And when we're
Mm-hmm.
congruent with what is most important to us, we find ourselves in more joy and contentment and less like
Mm-hmm.
spinning our wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you said two important things there. The first one was about like kind of examining the coulds, shoulds, and would, like those kinds of things, the expectations, the things that you assume. And I'll say the process of simplifying your life is often a very complex journey because it's um, riddled with all sorts of things. It's riddled with expectations, the shoulds, right? The shoulds for I should, shoulds from other people. There's societal kind of mechanisms that kind of keep you in place, right? So you kind of start to stray on a different path, and sometimes social circles will change, right? Like those are all ways that society kind of keeps people in check. Is like social pressures and things like that. And then like on the consumer front, it's so difficult. Like I've been on this journey a long time. I did a no buy year where I basically only bought groceries. Yeah, there's a post on the website we could share, but yeah, it was a no buy year. There was a few rules, but like it was very, very strict on what I could buy and what I couldn't. And I kept a list of the things that I did want to buy. And at the end of the year, I looked at it and I was like, I understand why I wanted those things in that moment, and like how I convinced myself I should. And it was a short list. It was like 7 things. It was, I don't know, call it $300. Like it's not a big amount, but I think what it highlighted to me was that at that point I had been a minimalist and a tiny house person for 10 years. So this wasn't like I was brand new to not buying or low consumption and things like that. But it's like the buyer cycle, consumerism still had a very strong hook into you, and it's difficult to sometimes examine and separate yourself from those desires that are baked into our culture and influence us in like very subtle ways, and maybe even one might describe some of them as insidious ways, right? Because if we're not making those decisions for ourselves, a company is happy to do it for us to their benefit. And so, yeah, I think that journey it's a difficult one. You're gonna get tripped up along the way. It's fine, like you just keep on moving forward. But it's there's a lot of deep work that I think you have to do in that space just to be successful in kind of extracting yourself from consumerism. It's not that like consuming things is inherently bad, right? But I think again we have to be intentional about it, and then kind of figuring out how you're going to handle social pressures to have the latest clothing trends or to have a flashy car or the social status of a large home, things like that. So yeah, all those things are really tricky in that journey, and you're going to struggle with it, right? Like if you go on this journey, you will struggle with it, but guess what? You will be much better for it in the end. Um, and even if you kind of end up close to where you ended up, but you've got there in an intentional way, and that's what's important.
Yeah, I think that understanding, being pragmatic about the world that we live in and understanding that, consumerism is in the air that we breathe. And
Yes.
we have all, grown up with it in every aspect of our life. And it has become unavoidable in terms of, every screen that you ever look at, right, is going to be telling
Mhm.
you what you should want. And
Yeah.
so you have to give yourself some grace in this process and understand that it is, a process of, just refining things over time and moving things more towards your intentionality over time. And you're never going to be perfect at it. We can't be, extreme. But at the same time, you can always just start to make some progress there, and it can just have so much benefit for yourself and
Yes.
the way that
Mhm.
you feel in the world that, you've created for yourself. On Less House More Moola, we hear so many stories of people living unconventional lives. Each of them is literally building their alt-American dream. Are you tired of putting your dreams on hold because of money? Well, let's fix it. I have a two-part offering that is here to help you. First, I'm going to give you access to my financial freedom calculator so that you'll understand your numbers and have a tangible starting point. This is free. And then second, we'll book a session to figure out your finances so that you can live your alt-American dream as soon as possible. This is paid. Why am I giving you something for free? Because I'm passionate about empowering people to choose an unconventional path. So let's work together to figure out money so that you will know that you've officially taken action on your plans. This offering is for you if you're unsure of your cost of living or how much savings you might need. You don't know what money move to make next. You dream of an unconventional life built on your terms. You're seeking a permanent solution and not a one-time motivational boost. You want to learn about money from someone who shares your interest in breaking away from the norm. So what do you think? Are you tired of starting sentences with someday when I? Then go to altamericandream.com and get the financial freedom calculator. For yourself. So it seems like that there's a lot of traction for this concept in this moment. So tell us what you're seeing, from your analytics of folks coming to your site and what you're learning about that, the trend and the idea and who it's
Mhm.
reaching and who it's resonating with, and just let us know a little sort of back end of what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So I think when I joined, kind of first started doing tiny houses and joining this community, it was a very narrow type of person, like in terms of demographics. And, I think over the years, as I've been able to grow the community just through outreach and just like general awareness, because I remember when I started, no one knew what a tiny house. You say the word, the phrase tiny house, and they're like, I don't know what that is. I mean, they like intuitively understand small home, but they didn't have the concept. Now they're like, oh, I saw that on HGTV and all this kind of stuff, and so it's grown in just broad awareness dramatically, and with that, so has the diversity of people and ideas and the way that people implement it, which is amazing, because it means that it's more accessible to people. And then the other thing that I'll say is that while I don't think tiny houses are probably right for everyone, the idea of intentional living, simple living, is something that resonates deeply with almost everyone, right, to some extent. And I've been able to use kind of the platform of tiny houses to kind of infect the mind virus, if you will, of larger, consciousness of the U.S. and beyond, with just this idea of like, hey, let's be intentional, let's live more simply, let's think about what we're doing, let's not just follow the traditional path that is prescribed to us, that's bought and sold to us. Let's think about what we want to do. And so I think largely that'll be the larger impact of the website, and what I've done is just kind of getting people to be like, well, maybe I don't need that second car or those extra clothes or all this clutter. Maybe I don't need to be buying all this stuff. And yeah, so that's those two things. That is what I've seen over the time, is that we've we've broadly reached a wider range of people. And while we talk about tiny houses, we're also moving the needle more broadly for that kind of concept.
So when you and I had a little conversation before, when we were planning this conversation, you mentioned the word right sizing your home. And so, I totally agree. Tiny houses aren't for everybody. I think they present some unique challenges when you're bringing, multiple generations together, whether that's kids or parents that need support. Though, you can have multiple small housing units on your property like
Mm-hmm.
we do on in our sort of multi-generational setup here. Um, and I think that just highlights the fact that the single family home is being built in a way that isn't really supporting the needs of people. 4 bedrooms or whatever may not support people, trying to work from home and trying to bring, parents there, but, you want some privacy and some separation. So there's a lot going on in the housing world in terms of, solutions for that. And then the people that completely are ignoring what the needs are because they're just building maybe the home of past generations. So let's talk about right sizing your home. What does that mean to you? And what suggestions do you have for folks that are trying to figure that out?
Yeah. So I think let's kind of start with what the average home is in America. It's 2,600 square feet. It's 3 to 4 bedrooms, and then it has like this checklist behind it: granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, breakfast nook, whatever you want to call it. There's a very specific kind of formula to these houses, and where that arose was because housing has gotten so expensive that you needed to be able to get into a house, but then also out of a house. And it became an investment, not a home. And the reason why that checklist arose is because that's the largest market segment. So that meant you had the maximum opportunity to sell your house, which I think is just fundamentally like a sad state of affairs, right? Like we should be living in homes, not houses, right? Not investments. But a lot of, the reality of the world is that most of our net worth is tied up in our house. That's a lot of people's nest eggs. They're kind of counting on that later at some point to cash in and hopefully like get through retirement, at least in part on. And so what that means is we end up in this like default size and type home, and they may look a little different on the outside, but that's kind of where they've ended up. And I grew up in a home like that, and it it's just kind of what most of the houses are. I think there's like less than 4% or 6% of houses in the United States are under 1,000 square feet. It's very, very small. And so it's difficult to even find one if you want to live in a smaller home. But yeah, so for right sizing a house, I kind of come up with this concept just through my own journey because I grew up in a large home. Um, and that was, obviously like I lived with my family when I was young. So like I didn't need, the same size house as if we were in a 6 person family. And then I moved into an apartment. It was about 1,000 square feet. And that was very comfortable. But the layout wasn't quite great. And so like it was a lot of wasted space in that place. And then from there, I was living there while I built my tiny house, and I moved into my tiny house, 150 square feet plus the loft. And what was interesting about that experience was it was one of the most comfortable spaces I've ever lived in, but it was also like the size of the closet that my old place was. Um, and so that was really interesting. And as I lived in that house, I lived in it for 10 years, and now in this house, but I found that there was like 150 square feet. It was very close to what I needed, but there was like two kind of things that didn't suit my needs. And the first one was a home office. Didn't really have a great place to be home office, and I also kind of liked, having some a dedicated place to work and a dedicated place to live. Kind of separating those a little bit where I could. And then a garage, right? I needed. I like what I discovered in building my tiny house was I really like woodworking, and that's hard to do in a tiny house. So yeah, like through the building process, I learned that that was something I really enjoyed that I wanted to pursue. So I wanted a garage. I didn't have a place to park my car really. So those were the two things that I missed, and so um, when building a house up on some land now to kind of create a homestead. And so in that process, I was like, okay, so the 1,000 square feet was, you know, what was pretty good. 150 square feet was kind of missing these things. And I kind of figured out what each room I wanted for a size and what they did, and very, you know, basically made a list of like, okay, I want my house to be able to do these things. That means we need these specific spaces. These specific spaces need to be, you know, like at least this kind of square footage. Like I kind of found, all right, this is just enough, but not being too big. And then when I added up, I kind of landed on a rough square footage. And then I went out, found a plan that was similar to that layout, size, and everything, and minimize hallways and things like that. And then now that's what we're building. Yeah, through that process, it was just basically like right sizing. Now, not everyone's going to have the opportunity to do this, but you can kind of practice or figure out what's right for you if you're building. If you're thinking about building a tiny house or downsizing to kind of determine what is right for you, right size for you. And so you can do this by, if you have extra rooms, just like closing those off and not using them for a little bit and just kind of seeing how that feels. And then I do this exercise with tiny house folks is when they're trying to design their own tiny house is go around your house, shut all the doors, put a post-it note on the door, and put a pencil on the molding above. And every time you go in that room, write down what you did, you're doing. And then after a week or two, you basically have this comprehensive list of all the things you actually do in your house and what you needed to do. And then from there, you can decide, okay, can this be a shared space, multi-purpose space, or does this have to be a dedicated space? And if so, how much space do you need? How much storage? Like, what are the things you need to support that activity? And what it means is that you end up with a a list of requirements that is like actually what you need and actually what you do. Because I think where a lot of people get into trouble is they have these aspirational things like I need a huge home gym because I'm going to work out every single day. You say, okay, well, how often do you work out now? Zero. Okay, well, maybe you don't need that, right? Like that's a good aspiration, absolutely. But maybe start working out now. Like if you work out every single week for the next 6 months, and you realize that a home gym it would be better, then okay, maybe we'll work that into the plan. Or maybe you do that and you'll decide, I actually like going to the gym, like another place as like a part of my routine. And so you can externalize that room that you would have otherwise had. And so, yeah, that's the process I tend to guide people through when it comes to right sizing their houses, figuring out exactly what you want, how much space you need for that. And then from there, you have a list of requirements to come up with your design. And then you can kind of test it out in the space you currently have, if that's possible, by like closing off rooms or doing different little experiments like that. So, yeah.
That is such a practical and smart way to approach it. I'm guessing that there are more than a few people that one of the sticky notes, or more than one of the sticky notes, is came in here to put something in here. Like, just like it becomes so many rooms just become storage, right?
Yeah.
Storage
Hmm.
for endless stuff that we accumulate that we can't get rid of. And so that is an opportunity to sort of think about the stuff and, kind of what value that's bringing, that you've got whole rooms that you're air conditioning. And then
Right.
all you're
Yeah.
doing when you go in that room is, put another, pair of slippers in here, put another, box of decorations in here, put another, set of whatever that I got from where, like, it just becomes so much work around maintaining and storing stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I found in my apartment was I had a room that I furnished, not cheap, that I cleaned. Like I would go in there basically just to dust. I was basically being, just dusting a room. And when you're building a house, depending on where you live, that could be, it's two, three, four, five, $600 a square foot that your cost to build. Then
Right.
there's to furnish, then to heat and cool, and taxes, right? Like so it's getting back to the intentionality thing. I think it's fine if you have space that you use and is like supporting the life that you want. And that was another thing that I've talked about when we like get into design is like how can this like your house is a tool, right? It's shelter, but it's a tool to hopefully activate your life. So like how can we leverage it to do the things that you want to do? So if fitness is a really important part and you having a home gym really activates your health, like right, that has a lot of purpose, utility, and value. But if it's just an empty room that stack junk in and just pay to heat and cool, then that's not doing you a lot of favors. So, yeah, figure out exactly what you need, build to that, and you'll be way ahead in the long term.
I love that. This is such a great and smart practical application for folks. And I hope that, listeners get a chance to really digest that concept because I think that's really smart. So, I want to talk a little bit about debt.
Mm.
And another thing that you said to me before about the deep change that comes from being mortgage free. This is a topic very front and center for me at the moment because we just became 100% mortgage free and debt
Mm.
free on October the 4th.
That's very
And
exciting.
I feel deeply changed, deeply changed.
Yeah.
Um, and in so many ways, I could talk about that forever. So tell us, because you're building a house right now, tell us how you think about debt when it comes to building a home, because as you said, we should be living in homes and not investments,
Mm.
and how you think about being mortgage free.
Yeah. Yeah. So broad strokes, like I've just been very debt averse and um, it's always worked out well for me in that regard, like just between quality of life, less financial strain, but then also the opportunity cost to do other things with that money. And I've reaped those rewards over the long term in many many ways. But I mean, I think debt is one of those things that you need to again be intentional with, right? Like it it technically is a tool, right, that you can leverage for different purposes and it has pros and cons to it, right? Like it can bring an enormous amount of stress. It can be a weight, an anchor, but it also can help you, do certain things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do that, financially make sense, give you a place to live, things like that. So yeah, I have a mixed sense when it comes to debt because I've been so debt averse, but I realize when a long term goal of mine has been to build a homestead and do that. And now that I've kind of right sized my house through my tiny living journey, uh, I knew that it was going to be a larger home than tiny house, which is pretty much every house on earth. But yes, so I knew that leveraging debt was going to have to probably be part of the makeup, because initially I'd wanted to do it all cash, and then what I realized was that price increases around housing and inflation and those kinds of factors were increasing faster than I could save and earn. Right, even though I had increased my income through consulting and all these kinds of things, it's like quite a bit, it still wasn't enough to outpace all those things, right? Like I could, let's say, okay, let's call it $50,000 short of where I want to be. It's like, okay, I could buckle down, and let's just say the next 12 months, I save up that $50,000. Well, it just went up $70,000 in that time, right? So that was, when I realized that, then I kind of ran all the numbers, and that's when I said, okay, I can leverage the debt to pin the price in this moment in time, and then I can continue that saving journey and attacking that debt to you know give me that time to do that without having the other part, the other costs rise. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I've started to look at this debt with this home, because it is a larger project. Like, this is not, just my first tiny house was $35,000. My down payment is way more than that on this. And so, yeah, I realized that, debt would allow me to kind of pay for the house and at a certain interest rate. It became a fixed known quantity, and I could map that out. And it basically removed a lot of the question marks that existed around the house, so I could plan and map out that financial pathway, and then work from there. So yeah, it's one of those things that I have mixed feelings about, but when I ran the numbers, it made the most sense for the circumstance I was doing. If I could have pulled it off all cash, I think that would be better, right? So, kind of getting back to the initial kind of impetus of your question is like, well, how does being debt free activate your life? And I had this 15-year run where I was debt free because of the tiny house, and uh, I was with that. There was just so many activations and these points that really boosted the quality of life for me. So I was able to, have more time to spend vacationing, to be with family, friends, things like that. I wasn't stressed as much about the money, like that was, I think, a big thing coming out of the recession. Like, I was very worried about money, right? I was still dealing with student loans. I was, at that point looking for a job. I had just gone out of school, so I hadn't had even a chance to build up any financial reserves or rainy day fund. And so, once I was able to move away from my apartment, which was about $1,500 per month for rent and utilities and all that kind of stuff, then my housing costs dropped to 15, right? So, and that was utilities and all that kind of. I was on solar. Uh, I used about $5 in propane a month, and then I chipped in for the water bill too, and then I chipped in a little bit on the taxes of the landowner that I knew, and so yeah, it was $15 a month. So going from 1,500 to $15 was huge, and what that let me do was pay off my student loans way early. I mean, all of the people I went to school with are still paying their student loans. I haven't had a student loan in 13, 14 years, something like that. Um, it let me travel unlike anyone I know at my age that isn't like just a trust fund kid, right? It let me start a business, the tinylife.com, and then I've actually started some other businesses, and you know, none of that would have been possible. And that led to increased income. It meant that I could, spend more time with my family and friends and just be more available and just like all those kinds of things. And so when I looked at all the things that I wanted my life to be when I was intentional, like thinking about it, debt free at the very least enabled all those, if not maximized them. And so, yeah, just between the luxury of time, the reduced stress, the opportunity of using those dollars in other ways, it was just remarkable. And like I try to put it into words, and I fail every single time because until you live it, it's hard to describe. You're starting to see the glimmer of it now, and you'll probably, if I talk to you in 2 years, you'll be like, oh my god, I had no idea. And it's I think the time and the flexibility was one of the things I appreciated the most, because when I compared, like, it was odd because like I wasn't working a traditional job. I wasn't working the hours because I didn't need to work the hours. Um, I found myself, going on walks during the day and doing all these things, and it was me and retired and rich people is basically what that was out there, right? Like, and so what struck me about that was, okay, I have the wealth of time because I don't have all these things dragging me down, equivalent to someone who's in, the late stages of their financial journey, or very wealthy people who have many, many resources to their disposal. And I could have an equally good quality of life on the things that I thought that mattered compared to those groups of people. And yeah, the whole thing was just incredible. And like I couldn't, even when I was doing it, I was like, is this real? Like, I almost didn't believe it. But then I was hanging out in Croatia for 3 months, right? I was traveling all over Europe. When family needed me, I could just say, okay, dropping everything. What do you need, right? Like I could be there for the people that mattered. Um, and so, yeah, it's hard to put a number on that, but the debt free living and intentional living enabled all of that.
Couldn't say it any better. That is so true. And, on and on about how it allows you to think differently about the choices that you're making with your time and where you want to maximize your efforts. And you get, to make those choices. And I think that this path for folks that can get on it just allows them to have such a bigger impact in the
Mm-hmm.
world. So I know we're kind of running out of time. So Ryan, please share with us any final thoughts or offers that you have. And I also want to highlight for listeners that there are state by state guides that Ryan has published on the tinylife.com, which can help you if you are thinking about simple living or tiny living. You can go and research a particular state that you have interest in or that you live in to figure out what are all the specifics about the regulation and what builders may be there and communities, all of those things. So make sure you check that out on the tinylife.com, those state by state guides. That was a huge project, I understand,
Yes.
from our earlier conversation. So make sure you utilize those. And so any final thoughts for listeners, Ryan?
Um, no, I think we covered most of it. I just encourage people to take some time, slow down a little bit, take a step back, consider everything, and then decide what is right for you, what life you want to build, and how all the decisions that you make, financial, housing, or otherwise, support that, right? And if they don't do that, then you probably shouldn't be making room for them in your life, right? So simple living is often not just what you're making space for, but what you're not allowing to make space for. And that could be physical stuff, mental energy, your dollars, whatever. But that intentionality in any context will be really powerful for your life, and you'll live a better life, see more success, and be happier for it. So, yeah, thanks for chatting with me today. And if anyone wants to know more, thetinylife.com, we have tons of resources there, all for free. Happy to have those there for you all. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you for taking the time to listen to Less House More Moola. I have another free resource on my website for you, the Unconventional Values Quiz. In just 2 minutes, you can pinpoint your style of freedom seeker, security guardian, adventure enthusiast, or community builder. Check it out at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. And one more thing. Podcasts don't have algorithms like social media does. They only grow by word of mouth and reviews. If this podcast is helpful to you, would you please post a review on your podcast app and tell a friend who is trying to live a values based life? It would totally make my day.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.